Welcome to part 6 in our series of video presentations on the drying of fruits and vegetables. In this presentation, we will look at basic sanitation. My name is Don Mercer, and I am with the Department of Food Science at the Ontario Agricultural College, University of Guelph. We will begin with a series of acknowledgements, followed by a disclaimer. Then we will have a brief introduction and look at good agricultural practices, as well as good manufacturing practices and good hygienic practices. Once we have finished this, we will wrap things up with some summary comments. I would like to thank Mr. Andrew Goodwin, Associate Industrial Development Expert with the Agribusiness Development Branch of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, for his considerable efforts in coordinating this project. I would also like to thank those who are assisting in the presentation of this material to various local groups. Their contributions to our training activities are greatly appreciated. At this point, I would like to make a disclaimer. The author assumes no responsibility or liability for any problems of any nature encountered through the application of the principles discussed here. And the main reason for doing this is because I am not familiar with the laws governing food production in the various countries where this video might be seen. This material is intended for instructional purposes only. Basic sanitation is a topic that we often dismiss as being something that everyone will naturally include in all activities involving food materials. While it may seem like a lot of common sense, it is surprising how many times we see examples of a total disregard for even the simplest sanitation procedures. Each stage of the food processing chain includes certain aspects of sanitation and safe food handling practices. We can look at the food processing chain in terms of growth or production of raw materials, conversion of raw materials to products, food preparation in the home, and of course, some intermediate steps. Growth or production of raw materials is frequently related to agricultural activities. Sanitation can be covered under the overall heading of Good Agricultural Practices, or GAPs. Conversion of raw materials to products is really part of the manufacturing portion of the food chain. Sanitation in this portion of the food processing chain can be covered under the overall heading of Good Manufacturing Practices, or GMPs. Overall cleanliness and sanitation are covered under the heading of Good Hygienic Practices, or GHPs. GHPs apply throughout the entire food chain. Food preparation in the home involves general cleanliness plus safe food handling and emphasizes these good hygienic practices. Please note that it might not be possible for you to achieve all of the conditions outlined in this presentation. The important thing is that you become aware of the various factors involved in sanitation and make a genuine effort to do things in the appropriate manner. In this presentation, we will examine basic sanitation with an emphasis on activities relating to production or processing. GAPs, Good Agricultural Practices, relate to all aspects of agriculture. They include the use of pesticides and herbicides, as well as the use of natural and chemical fertilizers. If you grow your own fruits and vegetables, you must follow good agricultural practices. If you obtain your fruits and vegetables from a supplier, it is your responsibility to ensure that good agricultural practices are followed by that supplier. So the key message here is, know your suppliers. It is not possible to take low-quality raw materials that have been grown under improper conditions and convert them into high-quality, safe products. This is like the ancient alchemists trying to convert lead into gold. It just doesn't work. So here we have a lead fishing sinker, and if I want to try and convert that into gold, well, sadly, I'm going to be out of luck. As the name implies, good manufacturing practices, or GMPs, refer to the activities involved in the actual processing of the materials. The first step in any food processing operation is to ensure the quality of the incoming raw materials, and we will be looking at tomatoes and mangoes later in this series of videos. This may actually be done by visiting the supplier and accepting or rejecting the material there on site. Do not accept any raw materials that do not meet your safety and quality standards. Here we have a mango that is spoiling. You should clearly define your needs in writing and not compromise your standards in any way. You may specify that your suppliers wash excess soil from the produce before you will accept it, and this is quite reasonable. Do not bring raw materials that may create problems into your production facility. So looking at this spoiling mango, we definitely do not want to bring it into our processing facility, and we should create a barrier to its acceptance. Raw materials containing insects or that are spoiling can provide incredible grief later. You should be aware of the flow of materials as they are converted to finished product. It is important to keep incoming raw materials separated from the finished product under good manufacturing practices. So here we have some mangoes as our raw material, and we will keep them separated from the finished product, which is these dried mango slices. If this is not done, problems due to cross-contamination can result. We can have raw materials that are in contact with finished product, and they will contaminate the finished product. However, if we do not allow this contact by creating a barrier between them, the raw materials cannot come in contact with the finished product, and the problem of cross-contamination can be significantly reduced. Cross-contamination is the term referring to what happens when processed materials that are clean come into contact with raw, unprocessed materials that can be considered as being dirty for the sake of our discussion here. The finished product can be contaminated by the incoming raw materials, which is highly unacceptable. There is no way that you want unprocessed raw materials contaminating your finished product. This creates a safety risk and may make your finished product unsellable. And what we want to do is everything in our power to minimize the amount of risk that we are incurring. As part of a good manufacturing practice program, you should have an area set aside for receiving and storing your raw materials. Even though you may have required your raw materials to be washed by the supplier, it is a good idea to have a washing station as the first step in your process. If you are using materials that are potentially allergens, you need to be highly vigilant. This is especially true with peanuts. Failure to clean all contact surfaces after use can allow contamination of later batches of materials with no nuts in their ingredient lines, and that can endanger consumers with sensitivities to peanuts and other things that are considered to be allergenic. Only potable, that is, drinkable water, should be used for washing, and excess water should be removed. It may be necessary to chlorinate the water to reduce the risk of microbial growth. You should use the directions on the bottle to get the recommended dilution for your purposes. I should add that we are removing the excess water so that we can maintain the quality of the product and not create an environment that could create problems later. If you need to store your raw materials before processing, be sure that the conditions are appropriate. You definitely want them to be clean, and they should be well ventilated, which is shown here by the fan that will help exchange air in the storage area, and we should also have the proper temperature for storage. We need to maintain the proper flow of raw materials through the storage stage. And for this, I would recommend that you use the FIFO approach. That means first in, first out. We need to have steps in place so that when new material goes in, the material that was already there is brought to the front so it can be taken out ahead of the material that just arrived. Cleaned raw materials can then be brought into the main processing area, preferably through a doorway that can be closed to isolate the raw material area from the processing facility itself. There should be a physical barrier of some description, and in the first point, I mentioned a doorway. To minimize the potential for bringing contaminants into the processing area, do not allow staff members from the receiving area to wander through the production area. However, some employees like to go on what I call a random walk, and they wander through the production facility, and as they do so, they are causing a risk of cross-contamination by bringing materials from the dirty side of the operation to the clean side, so you need to curtail that activity. If you have a single-person operation, you will have to set up a procedure to personally cope with flows of materials that minimize your travel between the clean and dirty areas. Remember, you want to avoid cross-contamination. Clothing and footwear should also be considered. Hairnets or head coverings are a definite must. Boots and shoes can track contaminants through your processing area if you do not restrict people from entering, so you need to curtail the random walk, which I described earlier. Some facilities use boot washing trays that contain disinfectants at their entrances. This consists of a shallow tray of disinfectant solution, and employees have to dip their feet into that and wipe them on a mat before they enter into the production facility from anywhere outside. Records of processing conditions and procedures, as well as formulations, must be recorded for future reference, and you can do that in a written production record, or you can keep electronic records on CDs or hard drives, or some other computer method. Finished materials should be packaged and coded so that they can be tracked and linked to production records. And we've already spoken about examples of production or best before coding in our previous exercise on quality and safety. Finished products must be stored in a suitable area, and of course it has to be clean and well ventilated. That can be done by small fans or large ceiling fans, which provide a higher level of air exchange. And we need to have the proper temperature for storage. Some material requires cooler conditions than others. Then, in addition to temperature, we also have to be concerned about the humidity, and we need to keep out sunlight, which can cause product to deteriorate. Proper inventory management practices must be in effect to avoid excessive time delays in storage, and that can be done by keeping a log of inventory, or by keeping your records on a computer system of some description. There are often numerous requirements or regulations for the actual processing facility. These can be national regulations established by the government of a country, or they can be state or regional regulations. In some cases, there are local regulations that govern food production and food distribution. All of these must be taken into account. and unfortunately I am not in a position to be able to advise you on the regulations of your particular country or state or local region. For good manufacturing practices, your facility must be clean. I've mentioned this before, and this is an absolute given. Windows must be screened to prevent insects and birds from entering, plus keeping dust and dirt to a minimum. And here we have a photograph of a bird sitting on top of some raw materials in a production environment. There needs to be adequate drainage on all floor surfaces, so what we need is a floor constructed of the proper material with an adequate slope that will ensure proper drainage of water. There should also be a covered drainage trench at the downside of the slope, and the cover will prevent accidents by people falling into the small trench, and it will also trap larger material that can then be removed and disposed of properly. Overhead, the ceiling must be in good repair. There should be no dripping of condensation, nor should there be any leaks. So let's take a look at how condensation can take place. We have water vapor in the air in many production facilities that travels upwards and strikes the ceiling. There, because the ceiling is generally cool, we get condensation. And if enough condensation gathers, droplets can fall from the ceiling and land on processing surfaces. So we need to do everything possible to prevent the droplets of condensation from falling. And this may be something as simple as having adequate air exchange in our production facility. Overhead beams and fixtures may gather dust and grime over periods of time, which can create problems of dropping or dripping into the product. You need to have cleaning programs in place to address these issues. Proper lighting is important for worker safety and maintaining good general working conditions. Equipment must be arranged to facilitate good product flow and allow for cleaning as well as worker access. So here I've simply put together a brief flow chart showing product coming in to step A in a process. The results of step A then go to step B. Step B feeds into step C, and step C feeds into step D, and the product from step D may go on to another step, or it may be the finished product which goes into warehousing and distribution. But there needs to be good product flow, and you need to design your facility to incorporate this. All equipment must be cleaned by appropriate means immediately after use. This includes the use of potable water, proper chemicals, and thorough rinsing. Proper scrub brushes should be used. When not in use, they should be hung to dry in a clean environment. And you will need to do a lot of hand scrubbing to remove residual baked-on material or caked-on material so that it doesn't give you problems later on. Brushes and claws that are left wet or damp are a potential breeding ground for harmful bacteria and other microorganisms. If they are used without being washed and hung to dry, they can spread these harmful microorganisms throughout the processing area. In periods of inactivity, the equipment must be properly stored. All equipment should be rinsed or otherwise properly cleaned prior to use, in addition to cleaning it after use. And here we see a stainless steel mixing kettle that has been properly sanitized. However, before it is used again, it will go through a thorough rinsing and cleaning. Proper garbage and waste containers are required to control infestations and the attraction of pests. They should be kept covered as well as being emptied and cleaned regularly. Staff members, if any, need to be trained in good manufacturing practices and safe food handling. A trained staff member is one of your greatest allies in following good manufacturing practices and creating a high-quality, safe product. Cleaning chemicals must be stored securely in an area away from the production area, and once again I've simply shown a bottle of chlorine bleach. However, there may be other chemicals that you use, and these should be kept at a safe distance from the production area, preferably in a locked cabinet. Now let's move on to good hygienic practices. Hand washing is the first item that comes to mind with regard to good hygienic practices, or GHPs. A bar of soap will go a long way to preventing the spread of microorganisms and disease. Hands are the major cause of spreading disease, and we need to recognize this fact. You need to clean your hands thoroughly, and it may be advisable to wear disposable gloves in some processing areas. Hands should be thoroughly washed with soap and warm water. After rinsing with potable water, clean towels or paper towels should be used to dry your hands. The paper towels can then be used to turn off the taps and open the door of the room prior to disposing of the used towel itself. Washroom facilities must be properly maintained and equipped with hand washing facilities. Enough said on that point. All utensils must be properly washed and maintained in good condition. Washing in detergent should be followed by a disinfecting rinse in a chlorine solution of proper strength and a final rinse in fresh potable water. There should be dedicated utensils for use with raw materials and others for use in the processing area, and this is part of our effort to prevent cross-contamination. Cutting boards can be particularly problematic. This is especially true when dealing with raw meat, and even with raw fruits and vegetables. Do not use the same cutting boards for raw materials as in the processing area or for finished product. Once again, we're worried about cross-contamination. Plastic cutting boards are better than wooden ones. They're not as porous and they're easier to clean. You may want to have different colors for different processing areas, and here I've shown white, blue, and green, and they can be designated for use in different areas, and once again that will address the concerns over cross-contamination. All work surfaces must be washed and disinfected after each use. They should also be washed prior to their next use. Pets and other animals have no place in a production facility. As nice as they are to have around, pets can bring hair and other undesirables into production areas. So in summary, in this presentation we have examined basic sanitation under 3 basic headings. We've looked at good agricultural practices, or GAPs. We've examined good manufacturing practices, or GMPs, and we've looked at good hygienic practices, or GHPs. Anything that you can do to address sanitation is a step in the right direction. Cross-contamination can be a major problem if it is not recognized and measures are not taken to address it. Remember that the products which you are producing will be eaten by consumers who have a reasonable expectation of purchasing a high-quality product that is safe to consume. Failure to deliver a safe, high-quality product can have a significant negative impact on your business activities. Basic sanitation is just a matter of good sense to help achieve these objectives of high quality and safety in your product. Thank you very much.